Hi everyone, this is David with a quick tutorial on how to bring your Zoom meeting participants into your OBS streams and recordings. I'm going to assume you know the basics of OBS. You can see here we have a very basic OBS setup. At the right I have three scenes. The first scene is the main scene, which we're in now, and you can see this scene just has two sources. We have office background, which is the image behind me. If I click the eyeball, it goes away and it comes back. If I double click on it for properties, you see it's just a JPG image. And I have a nested scene which has me in it. Again, if I click the eyeball, I go away and come back. And I'll explain why it's a nested scene and not just the camera directly in a minute. The second scene, over here, we have my boardroom scene, which is the same basic concept. I have two sources. If you see down here, if I click off the boardroom, it's just an image. Again, just a JPG image. And again, nested me. If I click the eyeball, it goes away. And I am just a source in here that I could move around. I set it up so I'm right behind the edge of the table, so it looks like I'm behind the table. And then the third scene is the nested scene. I call it that because I don't ever use this scene. This scene just goes within other scenes. And this has my camera source. Now, the reason I use this nested scene is because sometimes I change cameras, sometimes the lighting changes, sometimes the brightness changes, or I put different filters on it. And if it's in here, if I make the change here, the change is affected everywhere. That way I don't have to update. If, let's say I'm in 10 other scenes or 20 or 30 other scenes, I don't have to update every scene. I just update the nested scene. So going back to our main scene, now how do we add someone from Zoom? Well, first of all, rather than directly add someone to this scene, I'm going to create a new nested scene so I could use it the same way I use the nested me scene. So let's create a new scene. I'm clicking the add scene button, and I'm calling this nested guest 1. And I'm purposely calling it guest 1 because we could have multiple guests. Okay, so you won't see me for a minute here. I'm still here. In our nested guest 1, let's add our source. And our source is going to be display capture, because you're seeing my main monitor now, but on my second monitor, my right monitor, I have my Zoom meeting. So let's add that. Choose my monitor. And here is my Zoom meeting. It's actually a recording of a Zoom meeting. My friend David said I can use this, but this is what a Zoom meeting would look like if it was running on my second screen. So the next thing I'm going to do is crop it so that it's my guest 1. If you hold down the Alt button, when you grab the corner of a source here in OBS, the line turns, you see that green dotted line, and it crops it as opposed to just shrinking it. So I crop, and now this window is a full-sized window of my guest in Zoom. And I can take this and I can just embed this nested scene anywhere I want. But to make the effect better, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click down on the scenes and add a filter. There's a bunch of filters that come with OBS, and I'm adding the NVIDIA background removal filter. There's some settings. I find that the default settings work fine. I don't change the settings. And now I have him with no background. So now let's go back to my main scene. I'm back, here I am. And now let's add David to me. So first, just so it's not awkward, let me move myself over a little bit. And then I'm going to add a source. The source is going to be a scene. The scene is going to be nested guest 1. And let me resize him a little bit and move him over. And here I am with my friend David. If instead of a recording, if this was a live Zoom meeting, we would be able to talk to each other live and send this out to YouTube or recording or something else. For the next example, this is the one that's a little more fun. Let's bring David to my boardroom. So the same thing, I add a scene. I'm going to add a source to this scene, which is a nested scene. The same thing, guest 1. Resize him by grabbing the corners here, move him into the right place. And again, let's move myself over so that we're on the top of each other. And This is a pretty convincing effect. It looks like we're sitting next to each other here. I wish this wasn't a recording of my good friend so I could actually talk to him. But this is how I take people from my Zoom meetings and add them to my OBS. And the same principle, if there were multiple people in the Zoom, up to 5 or 6 people, you really can get this working. You can bring them all in. So it's that easy. Now it's up to you to find some cool backgrounds and scenes to put yourself and your colleagues when you do your recordings. I can't wait to see what you come up with.